So what I wanted to do right now is introduce our panelists to you. Lee Clasper-Torch served on the faculty of Moses Brown School for 25 years, teaching courses in religion, philosophy, and ethics. Most recently, he worked as the Men's Engagement Coordinator for the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the 10 Men Project. He is a perennial student and seeker, a social activist and nonviolence trainer, currently doing presentations and leading workshops in philosophy, spirituality, and meditation. Lee has also been a longtime lover of art and poetry and is a visual artist, both in photography and painting. Let's welcome Lee. You're not hearing me? No. Okay. Janelle Codiani, Executive Director of New Urban Arts, is driven by the belief that a better world is possible and that creativity is the key to building it. She is passionate about enhancing community resilience through collective action and equitable access to the arts. Janelle holds a BFA from the Massachusetts College of Arts, concept-based major, the Studio for Interrelated Media. Wendy Grossman is an activities therapist and coordinator of the Healing Arts Program at Butler Hospital, a psychiatric hospital located in Providence. She has over 25 years' experience in utilizing the arts as a tool of engagement to promote individual and collective well-being in a variety of communities, including working with adults experiencing homelessness, adults with mental illness, adults with physical and developmental disabilities, in recovery from substance abuse, and with elder adults and youth. Wendy is also a writer of poetry, memoir, and personal essays. Her work has been published in the New York Times, Mom Egg Review Online, and her debut poetry chapbook, Dream Cycle. Her blog on cross-racial connection, Unlearning Whiteness, and other writings can be found online at www.wendyjanegrossman.com. Jason Ramsey is an assistant professor of biology at Rhode Island College and a biological illustrator who is particularly interested in the musculoskeletal structures, how did I do with that?
You did great.
Used during vertebrate feeding and locomotion as they navigate through different environments. Data collected from his lab studies is used to answer questions regarding the evolutionary and ecological significance of physical features, as well as to determine how we can use the knowledge in fields of paleontology, engineering, medicine, and education. He welcomes students to the lab who have an interest in learning how to use art to promote science and how to use science to enhance their artistic endeavors. Welcome. I'd like to start, I guess I've got to be really close here. I'd like to start by asking each of you to talk about how you got to a life involved with art and with the arts, and what art, however you define it, has meant to you personally. You want to start, Lee?
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you. First of all, thanks to Linda, thanks to Imago for having us and having this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for all of you for being here and in the part of the conversation. And even if I may take a moment to say this, as I'm sharing, I want to acknowledge a couple things. I wanted to thank Linda for acknowledging Juneteenth, as she has, but I also have a very special acknowledgement to make too. Another kind of an emancipation and a little beauty that entered the world just early this morning. It was in the form of my new and my first granddaughter, Eden. So she's here with us now. So Eden just, she came at 12:45 a.m. this morning, so on Juneteenth. So just backing up a little bit, first of all, I have to do a little caveat or a little disclaimer. I don't fashion myself an art expert, of course, in any way, shape, or form, or an art historian. But I love art, and I suppose in relation to the question that you just asked, Linda, just to give a little background to back up, is that growing up, I really started out as an artist, I might say, and it dates back to my 3rd grade classroom, and I remember my teacher, Mrs. Fields, that I'll give a shout out to, and how impactful, as the film mentioned too, about how education can be so impactful for a young person. And Mrs. Fields was so incredible in being able to spot in me what it seemed like others had not seen or potentially ignored in my artistry at that point. And she said in a report, Lee should continue doing his artwork, and she supported me in that. I felt very moved. So actually that was the beginning of when I started through elementary school doing art, into middle school, into high school, into college even. I took studio art classes and was painting. And then at some point, so my transition artistically sort of went vocationally into kind of channeling my aesthetic sensibilities into teaching comparative religion and philosophy, theology, and ethics. And so that's what my teaching career went into. I've kind of wound my way back at this stage and place in life to that first love of art. So I'm painting now, I've done some poetry, I've done some photography, and I'm enmeshed in it in a beautiful way. So I don't know, Linda, if that answered the beginnings of the question a little bit about where I'm coming from in
I
that.
think it did.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Wendy, how about you? What got you to a life that involved arts?
Yeah, I think it probably began with my mother, who fostered the idea that art was important. She was an artist, but she graduated high school, I think in 1958 or something, and her parents didn't want to allow her to, I don't know if I have this right, go to art school, because that wasn't a thing a woman did, back then, too wild. But, so she didn't really practice her art, but you're not thinking about this when you were a kid growing up, but I realized that, art was something good, art was something important. We had a lot of art around the house. She took us to see art and different things. I think growing up I had that idea too, that to be an artist you had to be able to draw well. I always loved art, and it's something you can't really put into words, or I can't, but drawn to it. And then as I grew up and finally got to shed those ideas about what art really is, I took some art classes. I've explored all different kinds of art making, whether it's visual art, metal sculpture, woodworking, painting on furniture, things like that. And I also, when I finally went back to school, well, perhaps I should backtrack, because I think the thing that had to intersect with my work and what I do now began when I first volunteered at a women's shelter in New York City. And the volunteer person there, who was an artist, I thought I was just going to go there and maybe serve meals. I didn't know what I was going to do, and he asked me to run art groups with the women there. And I was terrified of that idea, because I was still, I didn't consider myself an artist. I'm not an art teacher. I didn't know how to do this thing that he was asking me to do, but he had the confidence in the idea in me, I guess. And from that moment, the first time we had some paints, paper, stuff to paint on wood, draw with, and from that first time that I sat down with the women to make art, I just immediately, you could see joy, you can see people laughing, talking to each other, proud of what they're creating. And I was like, wow. And I think at the same time, I was learning about what art therapy was. I'm not an art therapist or a clinician, but that set me on my path to go back to school, study psychology, take some art classes, and know that I people making art, and for me, it's like one and the same, like the work I do with people making art, and then like the work that I do for myself too. Yeah.
Janelle, how did you get?
Turning my volume back up so I don't give us all a Zoom experience of muting myself. I have a similar young experience. Both my grandmothers were artists who didn't necessarily have the ability to pursue that as their primary vocation, but there was creativity and painting was happening all of the time. I come from like a long line of avid crafters and builders, and so there's lots of sewing and making everything that you could make. That was always around. And I had, some like relative skill as a young person that, my family was like, oh, this is your thing. And I did appreciate that as an outlet as a young person, writing and making, drawing, doing different kinds of, eventually photography. And I went to school originally for photography, but then found myself in production. And I focused on various different art forms. My primary one, I would say, to be like storytelling and performance. But production and the experience of creating the container in which creativity occurs, and fostering the space that people are experiencing the arts, and the platform to share art has really captured me and been a through line, I think, throughout. So it's like the little journey.
Yeah. Jason, did you begin in art or science or somewhere in between, or
I
somewhere
actually
else?
began with art, and excuse me if I get really loud. I might put my professor voice on, which projects a lot, and I do move my hands quite a bit, so I probably will move that wire quite a bit, so there might be a lot of static. So I apologize already. See, I'm doing it right now. So my whole journey actually started with my parents. My father worked a lot in metal, especially bronze. He's actually worked on a lot of the statues around the state, including the state seal. And my mother was always very interested in promoting the arts at home. And I was always a really big kid, but you really didn't see me on the sports fields very much. You'd probably see me next to the field staring at leaves or animals I had found. And I did get forced to play sports, but anyway. The process with my parents, though, was that they would always promote the artwork. And when I was little, I can remember when I was very little, my mother always helping me create things. I can remember her saying to me, you always would tell me, no, it's not like that. It needs to look like this. So I finally said to you, do it yourself. So I started working on it myself quite a bit, and I got more skilled at illustrating and whatnot just by practicing when I was very little. So she was silently promoting it that way to me. But when I went to school, I had a lot of trouble understanding science, and I loved nature. Nature was very inspiring to me. The shapes that you see, the branches of leaves, the shapes of shells, sticks, you name it. I would always be staring at them and wondering why they look the way they do. Well, the shapes are so interesting and organic. And when I went to school, I wanted to look at I wanted to search biology as well as art. So I was always taking art courses while taking biology courses. And I did not do that great in the beginning because I had trouble understanding, but art actually got me through it. I was able to make an art connection to the science, and I was able to draw things out instead of write normal notes using art rather than just text. And I was able to process it much better that way. And I had some good faculty I worked with that understood that's how my brain worked. And they promoted it a lot, and it was able to really get me through it all. And I fell in love with both and had been looking for a way to make the connection, and I found a field that works for me.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I want to ask, is everyone hearing okay? Yes, wait, with the little bit of static that you're hearing? Okay, so are you comfortable with that? Because we could switch to passing the mic.
If I'm the staticky one, which I think I am,
Okay.
I'm fine with the mic.
Okay. Okay. So
you prefer the mic, or you
If-
find it, yeah?
Am I really staticky, everybody?
It may,
Yeah,
that
I
may
am
be
really
that
sorry.
yours is the
So
wire.
why don't I,
Okay.
it's definitely me, right? See?
Okay, so I'll share.
Yeah, see, no more static. I might be able to do it without
Yeah,
it.
you might.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
right. I think that's right. Okay, let's try it this way for a while. Okay. So I wanted,
Oh, well, no,
Maybe we can hold.
okay.
sorry.
We've been on a long journey at Imago in terms of our AV equipment, I have to say.
I don't know if it's, is it on?
We
Yeah.
thought we were there, but apparently
Sorry,
not.
sorry.
Okay, long strange
Long
journey.
street.
Okay. All right, I would like to not start, but I would like to continue by asking you all a pretty big question. And why don't we start with Wendy this time? Since the earliest of human times, it seems that humans have been inspired to make art. Why do you think humans are inspired to make art? What does it do for us?
Oh boy, I was hoping the biologist and philosopher would go first, but let's see. I think it's just, I mean, we know since the beginning of time, it's just been an innate part of our being. We've been making marks and creating things and finding ways to communicate through our expression since the beginning of time. It's a way for us to be known as the individuals who we are and to connect to one another, to express who we are, to express things about ourselves, about our culture, what connects us, what's important to us. So it really does matter, and it really matters at times like this, which is why I feel like you have that question about why does art matter when we're going through such challenging times, because art can speak for us, it can inspire us, it can have us hold on to hope and help us imagine a better future, of what can be, and I think that's what artists really do.
Yeah.
And we need beauty, we need joy, and all the things that come from art. Yeah.
Lee, do you have thoughts about this?
Wow, that's huge.
Mm.
I'm thinking about the film that we just saw, and I was struck by one of the students that at the end of the year had written, and the question is, what is art, or why does art matter? Whatever the student said, art is everything. And that just jumped out at me, this sense that art is everything, that art is infused in everything. And while, as I said before, I don't consider myself an art expert and certainly not an art critic, but as one who works in the field of theology and spirituality, I can say that there's a deep sense of this intersection for me, and I would be interested in all of your responses to the spiritual realm, if you will, of life, our spiritual dimension of life, and art and artistry, and how it works. Someone once said that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, which somehow lays this this foundation of saying that in our very being, spirit, soul, if you will, art is, in a sense, a part of that. Why? Because spirituality, for me, is inward, ultimately. We can talk about religion and art when we talk about institutions, right? And again, I'm not an art historian. I'm not even an expert in religious art or sacred art. But I think all of us can speak to that dimension of the real and that inward dimension. So for me, I think art has always come from an inward space, and really it begins there. I'll tell a little story, if I may, related to that in my own experience. It was actually quite recently that there was kind of a moment for me. I was thinking, someone asked me, I don't know exactly how the question was asked, but it was sort of, Lee, kind of what makes you tick, or where do you find when you are doing something, whatever you're doing, that you're in a space that you really love? And I thought about it for a moment, and I thought that there is several things for me that do that, bring me into that space. One is reflective reading for me. So reading is a space where I can lose myself in terms of time. Meditation for me. So in my practice of meditation, of course, is that entering of that silence, and silence can take me into a place where there's a sort of timelessness to that. Gardening is another one for me. And of course, the spring is springing and blossoming, and so I'm out doing perennial gardening, and I can lose time. I don't know if folks have been there, where I'm out in the garden for hours, and then there's a timelessness to that. There's just a sort of timeless moment. Kind of move into the zone, and then there's painting. So if any of you are artists here, or ever been involved with your artistry, you find that you get enmeshed in it. And what is it about that space where there's this timeless moment? So for me, these things, at least, there are probably others, I lose myself. And isn't that what spirituality is ultimately, sort of losing one's self and coming into another space? It's kind of a metaphysical moment, I would say. So art, for me, taps the contemplative dimension of life. It taps the inward dimension, the intuitive dimension. So for me, when I think of art and when I experience art, it taps into that, what we might call, in the deepest sense, that intuition. William Blake, the poet, the painter, the printmaker, the mystic, in his Auguries of Innocence said, "To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." And I reference Blake because he's been meaningful to me, is that's what's happened. That's what happens to me when I get involved in art making. So, it's something about focused attention. So thank you.
A lot to think about.
Lot to know.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Jason, I saw you writing some notes. Do you have something to say about this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like I do feel it's a great way. It's always been a great way of not just expressing everything that everyone says as well. I mean, that's great, but also emotions. I mean, I feel like when I'm doing something, I'm trying to also express what's happening with me. It's a great way of talking about showing how you feel without exactly just, writing it down or talking to someone. I can express how I feel. I can show connectivity to others. People can understand. I feel the same way through your art when I look at it. So having those like community and connections, those group connections with other people, I feel art has always been such a massive way to do that with humans. And just being able to show how you feel within the world and being able to express it visually rather than just. Sometimes I can't get it out with words, but I can definitely get it out with pieces that you can view. So I think that's another key feature I wanted to make sure we threw in there. Yeah.
No?
Last, I agree with everything and all of the observations that you all bring to the answer to this question. I was telling my 19-year-old daughter about this and coming, and I said, one of the questions is, like why do humans make art? Why are people inspired to make art? And she said, "Are you qualified to answer that? Like, who are you on the panel with? You're not an anthropologist." And aside from being very practiced and having teenagers give me a hard time, I thought it was. She was teasing me, but it's also really interesting to think that you need to be qualified to have an answer for a question like that. And I think there is, sometimes we think about why we make art or art making as it has to be this really lofty thing. And I don't think that's reflected in any of your answers, but this idea that it is this extra thing. It's extra. It's superhuman to a degree, that you have to know how to draw. That this is like a thing that is outside of some of our reach, both with skill, aptitude, and I think I have maybe a too simple potentially thought about this, which is, is it me? I don't know. Which is It's not that big of a deal. I'm just getting clear of the wire. I think humans at our core are problem-solving creatures. We're solution finders. We are interpreters. We are pattern seekers. We're animals that are trying to make sense of things, and we are compelled to it. And creativity is a I don't want to say byproduct, that sounds gross, but it's an outcome of that. You know, it's the curiosity of that. I think we're also compelled to safety and community, and that requires connection and understanding. And so all of the like misinterpretations, the confusion, the compassion, empathy, understanding required for that becomes in and of itself another problem to solve. And so in art making, we are finding that connection, understanding ourselves so that we can connect to people, and find, you know, sort of this core biological safety in numbers. That sounds really diminishing, and I don't mean to diminish it. I really think like it is everywhere. It is who we are, and I think a huge disservice to that essence of us and the accessibility of creativity is the idea that you have to be particularly inclined to it. So yeah, that's my thought.
Okay, great. Lee, I know you have a master's degree in divinity. You talked a little bit about your relationship, what you feel is a relationship between your own personal life, spirituality, and art. And but I also, as a student of art and religion, what role do you think the arts have played in religions over time, in more of an institutional sense, perhaps?
Yeah, again, I could speak a little bit to that, but not fully to that. Obviously, I think for all of us who've done any historical study recognize how much the church, in this case Western church, but religions generally across the globe, have been benefactors of art, folks that have commissioned art. So some of, as we know, some of the greatest art pieces, certainly historically, that we might point to have been those that have come out of that world. So there's been always this sort of symbiotic relationship between art and the sacred. So that's real. I mean, you see that across cultures, across religions. You know, certainly the Islamic culture, we see some incredible beauty and the lifting up of beauty in that, in all traditions. So I think it's played an absolutely huge role within institutions, for sure. For me, there's that other dimension. Why is it there? Is how many of us have walked into a cathedral somewhere in the world, or some worship space somewhere in the world, and simply been awed in the silence. That for me is somehow the intersection of beauty that's being presented there, and it's in some sense, when you think about it, it's gratuitous beauty, isn't it? I mean, it's just, you know, it's just sort of there. Obviously, it's had reasons for being within particular worship traditions, but you don't even have to be of that particular tradition or religious path to kind of find this sense of awe in it. So I think it's pretty clear it's been a real intimate connection for years and years. So yeah.
Anyone else have any thoughts about that question? Okay. Janelle, I know you are passionate about equitable community access to the arts. I mean, it was one of the major themes of the biography that you sent to me. And its importance in creating a resilient community. What is it about the arts that helps build a community?
I think that it has a lot to do with expression and compassion. I also think that communities that are fostering creativity communities that are fostering creativity, particularly in young people, so that it becomes this like core exercise, or this framework for how you're viewing things, is it is also something that is generating curiosity, exploration, a capacity to failure, and I think it's really similar to science. I think scientists and artists are like best buds because you need the same basic either approach or skills, which is to question what is in front of you, to like get in with it, to be wrong, to attempt, and like learn, and I think that in and of itself is resiliency in my experience, in a community that is doing that together and is established around those similar values, is one that's able to like flex and respond to what's happening around us, to different pressures and different structures. I think it's also creates a willingness for things to change, to watch systems die and be destroyed and be recreated. The very process of creating something new is what is needed and to build a better thing than what we have done, in my opinion. But also it reduces the fear of that. And that's that. That's what I think about that.
Can you share any examples of how you've seen the arts act in community? You know, what you specific things.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Like, well, where's the proof of this, right? And I thought of a couple of specific things. I had the opportunity to talk through a fellowship that I was a part of with Abe Rybeck, who is the founder of Theater Offensive in Boston, and he told this really delightful story about doing some pretty serious anti-war protests, some pretty serious protests to the government during the height of the AIDS epidemic in the queer community. When he is a gentleman who is of an age where, massive losses in that generation of gay men. And he and his friends were doing these protests that were like hilarious, and had all of these costumes and about really serious and literally deadly things, and was bringing an element of chaos and joy to that reached people in a way that was different and really necessary. That is like watercolor bleeding your community into other people who aren't necessarily experiencing that directly, but that's really necessary for the breadth of change required, or engagement required to do the change. That was one thing I thought of. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention, like, at New Urban Arts where I work, I see that with the students daily, and it's really incredible. And we just had our senior send-off. And for those of you who are not familiar, New Urban Arts is a free drop-in art studio for high school students. It's after school, 4 hours, students can come in, they can engage with all kinds of really great art with the help of trained artist mentors, or nothing at all. They can just hang out, and they get to access creativity at their own time frame. And we do the celebration of the seniors who have been there. And to hear the way that this experience made them braver, made them kinder, made them more connected to each other, more capable, all of those things that we see in that was in that video. We see students say those things, and they're so connected to each other, to their practice, and to the artists that they've been able to form relationships with. And I see that in them, and what they feel prepared to do next. Those are a couple examples.
That's great. Wendy, you've devoted 25 years to using the arts to
promote individual and collective well-being in a variety of communities. Working with adults experiencing homelessness, adults with mental illness, adults with physical and developmental disabilities, and recovery from substance abuse. Can you share some of the ways that you've also seen the arts promoting both individual and collective well-being?
Yes, I can do. Yeah, like Janelle was saying also, I see it every day at the hospital and in the other places I have worked, right? So that people, and at the hospital especially, people are, experiencing a mental health crisis and really struggling with getting through the days even. They're just for a short stay, but, and we have to work through the resistance, like I had it myself about, I'm not an artist sometimes, but once people sit down and get involved with creating something, again, just the joy that comes from people, the feeling good about oneself. I do all my work in groups. I'm not a clinician, but we people have the chance to feel that they're in a safe space where they belong, where they can create, they can experiment with stuff, and then everyone, starts showing their work to one another, and they get praised for it, and they have this sense of self that is outside of just being a person that has bipolar disorder or is, experiencing depression or anxiety. We know so much. There's so much research and so much work being done in the field already that's been done for years that shows, how the arts reduce stress. It sends the pleasure signals to the brain. It fosters social connection, which is a big public health concern, loneliness, and the idea that we need to foster social connection in the arts. I really see that happening all the time in the work that we do. I was also lucky to be a part of the Rhode Island Arts and Health Network, which initiated as a partnership between the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts and the Rhode Island Department of Health to build awareness and help move forward the integration of arts and to promote health and well-being in our hospital and healthcare and community settings. And we were the first state in Rhode Island to actually create a state arts and health plan, and now there's arts and health programming at RISCA. So there's all this belief in this work and how it really contributes to our individual and community well-being.
And have you seen it help in therapeutic ways that maybe some other approaches?
Yes, that's a good question, because especially, in the hospital setting, right, people are so used to have to tell their, personal story, an intake assessment, with their social worker, with their psychiatrist, with their nurses, and so of course art is another way that I think, like you were saying, that, the nonverbal form of expression that someone can use to get something out, or just have another way of being and expressing themselves and having to talk all the time and tell their story all the time and focus on what's wrong with them. And it also builds relationships with staff and patients. Like I see, a nurse will come in to give meds to someone, and they'll be like, oh wow, you made that, and all of a sudden they learn something about that person, and it helps to build trust with the relationship. I've seen the same thing happen with the doctors and patients too. And being able to share their work or maybe talk about their work in a way that wouldn't have come out. And patients tell me that too in groups sometimes, like, wow, I can't believe, this is about this. And I'm not a clinician, I'm not there to analyze the work, but it's a way for them to express and make sense of how they're feeling and doing, and then it also can help them translate that experience to other people they're working with.
And then, at a personal level, you perhaps have also experienced the impact of art as a writer and as a poet and essayist. How does that sort of fit into this location that you've chosen?
I do creative writing groups also, with the folks that I work with. So again, it's another way to express yourself in a different way. I always feel lot of community, what I call community poetry. So my friend in the audience, Anissa Roof, challenged me one day. I started making these poems, weaving together my friend's status updates on Facebook. And Anissa had challenged me to write one every day for a year. And then I ended up doing it for like 5 years. And then I stopped for a while. I do it intermittently. And I found that those poems were just capturing everything that was going on in the world. And it could be anything, though, from, you know, from pop culture to like the political climate to capturing, you know, the racial violence that we, you know, maybe people that look like me were finally witnessing in, you know, real life. And then I also did write these poems during the pandemic. So, and I started in March and wrote a daily poem through September 2021 or something. And so that was a way for me also to connect to myself, to make sense of what was going on. Having all these other voices too coming together, and then I share them back out on Facebook was a way for me to connect with other people and get then their responses. And yeah, it just all feels connected to me, the work that I do and then the work I do in my working life.
Jason, as a biologist, illustrator, and observer of nature, especially vertebrates, although, are sharks vertebrates?
They are, yes.
He just came back with how many sharks?
5.
5 sharks in his
Yeah.
car this morning, right?
Yes, yes, in my car, yeah.
What speaks to you about the relationship between nature's designs and what we often perceive as beauty in art?
Oh, that's a great question. Hope we have enough time. Everybody strap in. So first and foremost, I'll take it from my perspective, and everyone can hear me in the back, okay? Yeah? All right. From my perspective, natural shapes, whether it's a bone or a leaf or a blade of grass, they have they're just so aesthetically pleasing. They have this fluid shape to them. They're beautifully irregular, where nothing is super symmetrical, and they can actually have a lot of symbolism, I think, too. And I think it's a lot of the reason why we are drawn. I think a lot of people are drawn to the shapes in nature. I mean, think of a skull versus something like a green leaf. Two very different symbols there, right? Two ends of a spectrum. You know, and those are natural shapes, and we've connected them to things that, you know, are very personal to us. Like, you're not supposed to see a skull until you're dead. The green leaf usually pops up at the beginning of growth in the spring. So there's a lot of emotional connection, I think, too. And when you look at the structures in nature, the designs that are there, they're beautifully complex, but again, so incredibly irregular. When you do look really close, even looking at, say, a bone close up, there's so many intricate little holes, bumps, grooves, crevices, you name it. And they were designed, say if it was a human bone, during that person's life. It's very individual. Every little part of that person's life molded that little structure. And it also performs some unique tasks that we have trouble replicating. That's how I'm inspired by living organic structures, is that I'm always trying to answer that question of, why does it look like that? Even when I was a kid, that's why I was staring at things, because I was just so fascinated by the shapes. Why are there so many branching patterns in a leaf? Why do they not all look the same? You know, one can be nice and flat, one can have all these weird grooves and crevices and branches. Well, this one's really good at collecting sunlight, so is this one. Why don't they all look exactly alike? Well, this one can withstand hurricane winds, this one cannot. This one can deform and turn into a completely new shape based on how it's designed. Life's designs are just amazing to me. I think that's part of the beauty of nature, is that it's been sculpted by the world so long. It's at some of its peak designs, but they're always changing too. And you're always finding new things. Even when you think you've got it always solved, you look at something out in the world and, wow, it's doing something you never thought it would do. And yeah, so that's how I'm basically inspired by nature, and I hope a lot of you are too. So.
this point, I think I'd like to open it up to the audience, and questions that you might have. We're really hoping that this will be more of an open discussion, because I think a lot of us might have ideas about why art matters. Anyone like to get us started?
I have a question. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
do you
a
want to
thought.
use the mic?
Can you hear me okay? I have a
Mhm.
pretty good voice up
Okay.
here. I've seen a number of shows recently, in New York and other places about, art that is documents, so that we don't disappear. It documents period of time, whether they be periods of strife or religious strife or human strife or, whatever. And I think that we have to acknowledge that art can be very tough sometimes, but that it's important that we recognize how we can't erase it, and we can't change the way it impacts our history, and it should. So I'm just curious, what your thoughts are on that. That might not be as warm a thought as I'd like, but I think about that a lot.
Shot at.
Well, I was wanting maybe a little bit more, and what is it that you're,
I guess what I think about is the art that is sometimes difficult to look at. The
Ah.
art that, from times of war or from times of segregation or from anything that is really good, or even from times of nature, of disasters.
yes.
And we're living in a time right now where some of our art institutes, or what people want to, outside of those institutions, want to change what's in them. So it's a way of disappearing. It's a way of making things disappear. And art brings us into that consciousness. You can't make it disappear. It happens. It's there, and we live through it, or it affected my family or my people.
I think Victoria Gao made a mention of that in the opening video about how art is a reflection of can be a reflection of the time that we're living in. And I think you're making the argument that it's really important that it is a true reflection of the time that we're living in. It doesn't get changed or destroyed in some way. Any thoughts?
I have a thought about that. I think that here's what it makes me think. This is adjacent. This makes me think of this. When I was in college, I had this conversation with the vice president of the college at one point when we were talking about what kind of art history was being taught. And this is like, there's the question of like, why does art matter? And then there's the far worse question of like, what is art? Boo, what a terrible question. But something that she mentioned in this conversation that really stuck with me is that what is art changes as people and different groups have access, and by which culture is defining what is art. And some examples of that, especially in like Western culture, is when women could make work, and what does that look like? A conversation about the art forms of quilt making and the really rich history, particularly in the history of enslavement, of those being stories, being maps, holding lineage that wasn't otherwise documented. And so when I think about how are we documenting the moment, and how do we ensure that moving forward we have this really broad contextual picture of the moment we're in, that is a question of access. That's a question of context and understanding, mutual understanding, gatekeeping, and freedom of speech, and making sure that voices broadly have a platform, and then we can like sort out the story later, as long as we have all of those components accessible. And some of them are unpleasant to look at because they're telling a hard story. Some of them are unpleasant because we disagree. Some of them are unpleasant because they're made with different access to skills, and I wouldn't call that unpleasant, but some people are like, oh, it's unpleasant because it's not really skillful. But it's really important that we have all of that in the basket.
Mm. Mm.
Anyone else?
That was so well said. I don't think I could
Okay.
add anything
I
to
just
that.
wanted, I just
Yeah.
want to say thank you for that. And I think if I understood, where you were going with that is just that this in dark times, or can art, and how does art move and relate to darkness, if you will, and it seems to me that art can and should often bring us to those places that are uncomfortable, that are often dark, but there's still a power in that. It's interesting to me. I'd be interested to hear what others think. I think this question of the relationship between art and politics is a fascinating one for me. I think I tend to feel that the politics is a derivation of really powerful art, that art is in some sense it's powerful, and then it can move into and make maybe a political in some sense statement. But that's a question that I have in terms of the times we live. What's the relationship between art and politics?
Anyone like to pick up on that?
I think in dark times, particularly, the mere fact of making art is a radical act, because you're still trying to express your humanity and connect with other people and to continue being human.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I was just going to say to that point, if I may, in doing a little prep for this and thinking about it and coming across a couple quotes that I had that might speak to this. And I was just reading one of James Baldwin. He says, "It is the role of the artist to make the world a more human dwelling place." So somehow speaking, a more humane dwelling place. So it's the role of the artist. And then one other one that I thought was quite powerful, Ursula Le Guin, who we know as a literary giant, and she was accepting a distinguished award at one point, and she said this, and I think it happens, of course, literary arts, right? There are all kinds of mediums. She says, "We live in capitalism. Its power can seem inescapable. So did the divine fight of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art." So I'm moved by this kind of vision, which I think was related to kind of what you were saying. So yeah, thank you.
I was going to say back in the 80s, during the AIDS crisis, the city of Boston asked artists to respond to AIDS however they felt, and there wasn't money available to the artists to do this, and I made a piece. It was an 8 by 12 foot panel, whiteboard. It was like plywood, painted white. And on the panel, I wrote in capital letters with graphite pencil the word AIDS. And then I received about 500 erasers, and people were asked to erase AIDS. And the thing that I thought was really interesting is that as the artist, it was also kind of a guerrilla thing. I didn't really get a permit to do this. This is Back Bay Station in Boston. And I thought I was going to receive a lot of hostility from the audience, from the people coming through the station. I just thought, what are you doing this for? Whatever. Anyway, the response was absolutely fantastic. People just love picking up the erasers and erasing AIDS.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love it. I want to be there erasing it. I was thinking you were going to start to talk about the ribbon project that was happening during that time. And he was making a panel, but you did something just entirely other and beautiful. So,
I find it interesting the word matter, because this is, is like, I'm thinking of what art matters in the world. But then also, we've been watching some documentaries about artists like Gauguin and Degas. And, I don't think they were thinking about what art matters in the world, but it matters to them. It matters like every single paintbrush. It really is of importance, the process of it. So I find that a really interesting kind of dilemma in my mind about why art matters.
Mm. You. Yeah. Wow.
We could just add it's matter, too.
Are you saying that you weren't thinking those artists that we know were going into it to try to make something matter? They were doing it drawn in some sense from the inside out, and that's kind of what I heard. Right? It wasn't like I'm going to make something that matters. It matters to me, and it moves from. Yeah.
It matters to the world.
Yeah. Wow.
Linda, can you hear me? Linda, your exhibit is motivated with the idea of art, or I should say beauty, persists, not matters. She chose the word persist really specifically. Could you share with the audience why you think beauty persists? Or should persist?
Well, I think we see it persisting in nature all the time. In the seasonality that you see in New England, if you look in sort of at geological time, what happens over time with the environment, with societies, with cultures of people. I mean, what we're seeing is that we're always in a state of transition. And yet beauty persists or renews somehow within that process. And so that's what has given me some hope, and it's why I keep making art and why I've always been interested in art. It also reveals things to me that I don't quite know what I'm seeing sometimes. I've worked as a photographer for a long time. And at this piece on the end here I call Enigma. I was just walking in the woods and taking photos of the leaves, probably the colors of the leaves probably is what really attracted me. I got it back, I looked at it, in Photoshop. I started playing with the contrast, and all of a sudden there's this blue light and color that shows up in the background. And so I call it Enigma. But it's something you don't always see what you're looking at sometimes. Sometimes it becomes revealed through the process of making art. And so I think that beauty does persist, over time, and as long as we exist, I suppose, as long as humans exist.
Do you think photography for you can show that in a particular way, maybe than you've used other materials in the past, so how does photography also add to that in your own?
Well, with photography, you have a lot of different tools to work with. So this work is, I use a lot of very shallow depth of field in order to really focus on certain elements. And I suppose you could always use depth of field in almost any art form, but photography is suited, for something like that. So it's a way of focusing attention in a particular area for me. I'm one of those people that can't draw. So it was really one of the few choices for me in terms of art.
Last question. Do you think beauty is important for a healthy life, or a healthy culture, or a healthy time period? And I'm sure some of our panelists might even want to add to that.
I think it's part of life.
what level of life are we talking about? Just human life or microscopic life? I mean, there's so many levels. I mean, this beauty. I personally feel that there's some of the things I love the most would be considered the ugliest things, but they are still beautiful in the way that they perform, the way that they do the things that they do. They're beautiful in their ugliness. I'll be honest with you. So I mean, I guess it's really how you define beauty. Like, what do you find beauty as? You know, I mean, those images of leaves are beautiful. They definitely are. I think they are. You know, even when they're going through the stages of decay, and revealing the veins that are cutting through them, that are normally carrying water, or nuzzling the photosynthetic organs inside a leaf. Now they're all exposed, but they have this beautiful array within them. So I would say it's more, at least for me, what is beautiful to me? What is making that connection to where it has an emotional response within me?
For instance, Jason, I probably wouldn't ride around with 5 sharks in my car.
Yeah.
But
I think that's beautiful.
Remind me not to grab a ride from you after the show.
Yeah. No one better try to carjack me. It's bad news.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you guys have other opinions you want to throw out there too, but yeah, it's to me, it's like I said, it really depends on how you categorize beautiful beauty.
And has anyone here seen, I'm sure you have at some point, it's been years out, the movie American Beauty? Kind of a dark and intense film on a lot of levels, but that one scene that's been made so much of, but I always come back to that,
I know
the plastic bag scene, and for those who don't know, the young boy who videotapes this plastic bag that's just being blown by the wind, and spins and goes down, goes up and it spins, and he's replaying it for a friend of his who remember this, but it's stuck with me. He looks at this and it's playing in this old video, and the bag is just, he goes, it's just dancing, it's just dancing. Sometimes, he says, there is so much beauty in the world, I feel that my heart is going to burst. And I mean, that scene just was so powerful. In fact, I've used it in my classes in times past teaching. But this beauty is everywhere. The beauty that you see in nature with your with the photography here of nature, and he was seeing this plastic bag being blown. I would guess that probably all of us at some point have been caught up in our tracks at some point, when all of a sudden we've seen something.
Oh yeah.
And we get stopped. And it could be, it could be something that not immediately is seen as beautiful, but it's powerful.
Agreed. I mean, I guess it's the acknowledgement of that it's everywhere, even the things that are considered not, but they are.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
I think I want to add a little bit to this beauty talk, and which is, this is a little tiny tangent, but I am like a reluctant atheist. It's not how I started out. It's not even where I wanted to end up. But I find it to be. I feel more connected when I think of the accidental existence of all of us than I have in other iterations of thinking of the divine. And one of the things that catches me up a lot is that it is so beautiful here. It is so beautiful here. All of you are so beautiful. All of the decay and the cycle of life and the symmetry and the asymmetry, like it is incredibly beautiful every day, for no reason. And we are creatures that conceptualize beauty also for maybe no reason. What a miracle, what an absolute miracle. And beauty tends to be thought of as frivolous. Sometimes we think of beauty as frivolous, or we think of it as like an extra decoration, or we can think of it as like a tool for compulsion for other things, lots of times capitalism. And when I get caught up in the idea that beauty isn't necessary, I think about it slightly differently. I hear this in you. I hear this in you a bunch. It's awe. And so I would say that if pressed, I would say that it's not necessary to have a life full of beauty, although it is lovely, but it is necessary to be able to be awed.
That's a great way to
Wow.
put
Yeah,
it.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the therapeutic aspect of art, and specifically for anxiety, which is a huge problem. And I'm not talking so much about art appreciation, which you're both inspired as a chemist, for the actual creation of art. It seems that all of you have a studio environment where you bring people into an opportunity to create and appreciate art. I think we have the same problems that clinicians do. There aren't enough of them. What do you see as a multiplier effect in the larger world? Is the whole world a studio?
Someone back here said it should be.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on
It's-
that?
It's interesting because as an educator, I deal with students with a high level of anxiety, and they're very vocal about it. And I understand. I was in their shoes. I have a very interesting brain. It's very high anxiety all the time. So I get it. I work very, very intimately with our offices that help with student anxiety and special needs and whatnot. And the folks that come into my coursework, we try to get at some of that with art. You know, how can I get you through it? Let's tackle it from a different perspective. You might not understand this. Well, let's talk about it this way. Having a relaxing environment. So, and I feel like that, even just working with that in that office, that's another studio for me. You know, whether it's just figuring out ways I can talk to them, or figuring out ways I can provide a lesson for them using my artwork, or having them generate their own to make more sense of what we're discussing. Yeah, I feel like it's I do feel like every place is a studio, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think it relates to what we were talking about with beauty, because we find beauty everywhere. You know, we can find that everywhere in the world. And when I was thinking about it, I mean, there's just so much beauty in the moment, right? And so all the things that we experience, or a conversation we have with somebody, all of that to me encompasses creativity. In terms of anxiety, yeah, there are things out in the world that are outside of the traditional studio or community setting where people are creating. But I hear time and time again in the hospital how much just drawing, doodling, messing around with paint or whatever it is that someone's creating or writing really helps with anxiety and feeling more at peace. I know I feel more at peace when I'm writing or creating. I just get into this state where, you know, things just fall away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I really enjoyed this from everyone in the room and the panel as well. But it's leaving me with something to think about from going forward. And that is beauty a feeling?
To me it is.
So I don't know. I didn't look up the definition of beauty. But I'm getting the feeling from this discussion that beauty is a feeling.
You know what's coming up for me, and I'm not sure it answers this, but I'm just can't help it. To sure, I love this idea of the whole world a studio, right? It's kind of a variation of the whole world's a stage, right? The whole world's a studio. Oh, wow! But if the whole world's a studio, then it gets back, you know, to kind of this piece of awe. So if it's all around us, the question that I have is, do we have the capacity to see it? So in some sense, how much is it a function of the ability to see, right? But if there is a function of seeing, then it seems to make sense that can also be cultivated. You could cultivate the capacity to see more clearly. You're walking by, I don't know if any of you have heard the story of the experiment that happened in the subway in Washington, D.C. years ago. It was a really phenomenal experiment. Joshua Bell, famous violinist, went down in the subway. He put on a baseball cap, he put on some dark glasses, he had some scruffy clothes on, he had his violin, and he started to play in the subway. And they were monitoring to see who would recognize or otherwise listen to his music. People zipping to and fro, running back and forth, nobody paying any attention. Here's Joshua Bell, who's playing down the street the next night for hundreds and hundreds of dollars per ticket. He's playing for free. And the capacity to see. And what was interesting is that as they filmed this, and some parents were scurrying somewhere and their child was going like this. Their child was kept turning back, and the parent was wanting to scurry them forward, but the child kept wanting and then of course the realization after that. And the experiment was done to see what it was that, why is it that people are not seeing and recognizing that beauty when it's there. So that's what that makes me think about. The whole world's a studio. The subway is a studio, and we need the capacity to be able to see what's happening.
I think Lee kind of brought us full circle with that, because that's another reason why art matters, to get people to see and feel that awe, right? So it does come right back around.
I think beauty is an internal thing. When I was looking at your photographs, Linda, they made me stop, and I had that sense of awe, and I was perceiving beauty, but it was like recognition of something that was inside of me. So beauty is silence, and it draws us inside and connects with that place inside of us.
I just wanted to comment and, it just resonated that a lot of people also up here talked about art making as being sort of the process, a way of feeling, a way of communicating, and this question about why art matters, all of you just really talk about it as a way of expression or connecting with other people, which is, I think, such a way of more of us need to do that, or that whole world being a studio is that sometimes people are focused on the end product and not the process, and all of you are living in a way art matters because it's the way you move through the world and the way you connect and see and maybe express yourself, and it could be an alternate way to express. So I just love thinking about how we can sort of make that movement go forward so people aren't stuck on like the end product. What are you making? What is it going to be at the end, rather than how are you going to just be and create or express, or there's not one form of art. Like, we've all heard that, can you draw? I can't even hold a pencil, I don't know what to do. So just broadening everybody's envisioning of what art is, and then using it as a way of connecting. So just listening to all of you say that, and the way you guys move through the world and connect with humans, it's a ripple effect. So I appreciate that. I guess I didn't have a question, but
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So a lot of you talk about art from a kind of personal perspective, but what's your take on the capitalist view of the value of art, and how sometimes it isn't appreciated until someone's gone, or who decides what is art? We've seen the Kennedy Center get taken over, or Impressionism was radical at its time, or abstract expressionism, and now all those things are highly valued. And looking around here, who curates? So what's your take on who decides what is art and what value it has?
Wow. Great question. I'm reading a book right now. I just happened to bring it, J.F. Martel, Reclaiming Art in the Age of Artifice. And just the title kind of speaks to the depth of this question of, particularly in a capitalist culture, sort of how things are commodified in some way. And so what does art mean? And that's what I hear in your question.
I think I'm reminded of, and some of the things Janelle was saying earlier, and I've never felt like an insider in the art world or anything, and I don't have a lot of, learned knowledge about it, but there was that sense of gatekeeping and who gets to decide, what is art and what belongs in a museum and what can go in a gallery and are you good enough, and that stuff, that's not very palatable. And so like we all are creative beings, even if you think you're not. I mean, we all, we're all human and we all have the ability to create in all kinds of ways. And so I would like to see less of the gatekeeping and that knowing that we're all, creative humans. We all can create, we can share our art, we can be welcomed in spaces where we don't have to be gatekeeped. Yeah.
Yes.
You just make me laugh because you might know this already, but there used to be a museum of bad art. It was great. It's no longer a physical building, but then you can go online and visit the museum of bad art.
I think I have to.
Great. They have Mona Lisa's and whatever. I don't know. It was really great. If you want to enjoy art, there's a place to do it.
Thank you.
There's also a thriving experiment right in Rhode Island, in Providence, and it's AS220.
Yes.
AS220, right?
Yes.
And non-curated spaces, right? We think of art as being curated, and in the capitalist sense, if something needs to be, have a certain price tag on it, but it was this open space. And of course, it's grown into this incredible laboratory, for young people and others to thrive, right, musically and everything. Geez, I was in a garage band years ago when we played at AS220. We never would have played anywhere else, but they let us play.
I always love to talk about capitalism. And I have more thoughts that we have time for, but I'll share a couple. I was actually thinking about the relationship of art to religious, to the institutions of religion and this glory. I mean, this intense glory that you see in these cathedrals and in this work. And it is true that there were people who were doing that work to glorify God, and also there were people who were commissioning it to glorify power. And when we have these religious institutions that were the center of power, it is a way to awe the people, to demonstrate wealth and capacity, and I was thinking, how is that demonstrated now? Because we have our power is centralized in other places, and it's centralized just in the money itself, and in the institutions holding the money, which is not really dissimilar to how it's been in the past. But capitalism, it isn't the bravest machine, but it sure will churn everything up. And there's this distillation of everything that goes through to the blandest product, the product that is the most commodified, the most broadly appealing, and I think that that is why it's really important to have independent venues. That's why it's really important to have spaces, boards that are doing the curation, that are thinking about different communities, different education, what access to education and what the product then looks like after that. And I think that it's really important for artists to remember that the reason why art has been used this way historically, that it gets used now in capitalism, both for marketing and branding and in politics for a demonstration of power, is because it is powerful, it is awe-inspiring. And my whole team was reminded of this pretty specifically when our National Endowment for the Arts grants were terminated. But we had the opportunity to reapply with work that was going to really exemplify the 250th anniversary of the country. And you better believe we were going to be doing mockery pieces about how architecture was used during fascism and the way and film was used in these ways. So like we didn't, because we don't do curriculum at New Urban Arts, so we can't even do that anyway. But the point, the takeaway is that it is powerful, and people empowered know that, that it has this ability to move through things. And if we don't want the eye of the needle to be so narrow, we just need to make sure that the spaces where people are choosing are full.
Well, that was a hard one to follow, but well done. I just want to make one comment about that, because I'm in a very odd place when it comes to like my artwork, and how it's perceived, how its value is perceived, because I don't get anything for my artwork. As a matter of fact, I have to pay people to take it. Not that I think it's bad, but I publish in art and journals that have, they're scientific journals, and I'm describing new things through my artwork, or trying to convey some type of message about how some part of an animal could be used to, develop better prosthetics or something like that. And I have all these intricate art, intricate designs and art pieces, and they charge me for them instead of me getting anything for them. So and then they make money off them. I don't. So it's a very, very odd place to be in. And then of course, being a scientist and an artist, I got whacked pretty hard with my grants as well, really hard. So I have a pretty negative opinion of it. So, but I'll leave it there. Otherwise, I'll just start ranting.
Okay. All right. Well, any other questions from the audience? Or I think I'd like to just stop and move into the more informal conversations at this point. And I just wanted to thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a wild system.
Oh, God.
Great, guys.